Welcome to this connected match official episode around the global law trials. In this episode, we're going to follow up on the discussion that we had with Michael Patz and Chris White around the trials themselves. And we're going to have a look at some of the questions that you've been sending in. We're going to have a look at some clips that have come up on social media. And we're also going to get into the management and the opinions of professional match officials, Craig Maxwell-Keys and Tom Foley, and around how things might look on the telly compared to the community game, and how we can best manage some of these global law trials. We're also going to be covering what happens with the global law trials in terms of age grade rugby. So let's take a look. How's everything going, boys?
Go on, Tommy.
Yeah, all good at the moment. Just ready to start. So might be different next week, but at the moment, looking forward to starting another season.
And Craig, how's pre-season gone for you?
Well, everyone loves a fitness test, so they're out the way for another year. 2 games under our belt. To be fair, not many examples of the GLTs. So yeah, looking forward to the season starting and seeing what it holds.
Awesome stuff. Craig's obviously alluded to a little bit of fitness testing there. If you're still due to do your fitness test within the community, just have a quick look at our S&C series that's come out with Alex Reid and a couple of the guys involved in the professional unit there. Great resource to start getting your teeth into around sort of body protection and fitness testing and preparing for matches. So just signpost you over to that. But as we say, today we're going to be talking about the global law trials. We've had loads and loads of questions that have come in, so that's fantastic. Thank you. And we're just going to work through a couple of them today. Have a couple of clips, see what's been going on, and also get a little bit of insight into how these are going to be refereed, not just by professional referees in the Premiership and the Championship, but also in the community game. So if we start off talking about your experience of the GLTs, I know, Craig, you said there's not been many on show in your game. What's the general consensus in the group around the GLTs? How do we think they're going to work from us as referees? How do we think teams are going to use them? Things like that.
Well, they're very much branched into 2 sections, aren't they? You've got the 50-22 and the goal line dropout, which is all about creating space on the pitch and keeping more ball in play, creating some more entertaining spectacles. So it's interesting how the clubs look to exploit that or not. I know some clubs have actively looked into how they can use it to their advantage. Others are going to just see how it plays out and not really change too much what they're doing. And then the latcher piece and the clear out piece is more safety orientated. So provided that doesn't see injuries inflicted on jacklers, which no one wants to see, particularly any level of the game, then that's a positive there.
And Tom, has there been any discussions sort of from your aspect, or?
No, I think, as Craig said, there haven't been, in the games I've been involved in, there haven't been that many sort of incidents where the global law trials have come up. And I think that's quite an important point to raise, in that we don't stop refereeing what we've been refereeing up until now. It's always the case that we get over-focused sometimes on the things which are new, and we forget that the sort of the bread and butter, getting the tackler out. We forget about the head contact process and everything else. So I think it's not something to get too worried about, too concerned about. We'll hopefully answer some of the trickier questions today, but fundamentally we've still got to go out there and referee the rest of the game as well.
And I think it's important to stress that this is new for everybody, but there is still a massive part of the game that we need to referee. These global law trials aren't the be-all and end-all of the 2021-22 season, but they are going to be a part of it that we need to make sure that we're refereeing as well as the other phases. So I know, obviously, from a couple of my pre-season games, something that's sort of new since the community game has restarted has been around that tackle refocus, like you just talked about, Tom. I think that's still a massive part of the game that, even though we've not really done much of it within the community, it's still something that we need to have a big focus on. So, yeah, awesome. So we'll get tucked into some of these questions, really. So, Craig, we'll go sort of backwards and forth. If there's anything you want to add in, but I've got a question that's come in that says, if the ball is carried into goal by the attacking side, but is then ripped out backwards by a defender and rolls over the dead ball line, how are we restarting the game? Is it a goal line dropout, or is it your normal sort of 22?
Hopefully I get this one right. Tommy, jump in if you need to, but it's a goal line dropout. So on the basis that the attack have taken the ball into the in-goal area, the defence may have stripped it and caused it to go dead, but the attacker responsible for it being there. So in that situation, goal line dropout. Although, funnily enough, that is a question that we sent up toward Rugby to get clarity on. So it's like thinking to what we had to get clarified.
Awesome. And we've got a couple of questions around sort of goal line dropouts and 22 dropouts and things like that. So it's in a similar sort of ilk. If a defender is driven back over their try line by 2 attackers and the defender grounds the ball, how would we restart in? Is it a goal line dropout? Is it 5-metre scrum, Tom?
So this is one where it hasn't changed. So in situations where the defence take the ball into in goal and it's made dead, they are responsible for taking the ball into in goal. So in this situation, that would be a 5-metre attacking scrum. So I think it's important to note that we still can have attacking 5-metre scrums.
What a shame.
Yeah. If the defence take the ball into in goal, so situations where a ball is charged down in goal, or the situation you just talked about as well, or if the defence knock the ball on in goal or within 5 metres of their own line, we're still going to have 5-metre attacking scrums.
Awesome. So I know that obviously one of the things that's going to lead up to things like goal line dropouts is being held up. Obviously that leads to, as would have been a 5-metre attacking scrum, obviously it's now a goal line dropout. What advice can you give to referees around sort of being held up? Obviously there's now a big benefit to the defence if they hold the ball up, but is there any advice that you can give to make sure that we've got accurate decisions, make sure that we've not missed the ground in, anything like that?
Yeah, we've talked about this as a professional group. Now we're lucky enough to have TMOs clearly, and we run the risk of having a lot more TMO decisions if we can't see where the ball is, because obviously that goal line dropout could be taken from anywhere and as quickly as they like. So the worst case scenario is we miss a potential try, defence get the ball, whip it to the other side of the pitch, go quick, and we're 80, 100 metres away, potentially having to come all the way back. It's a very awkward situation. So I think the same applies for the community game as it does to us, which is it's all about positioning, which links to what I mentioned earlier with fitness testing. Like the fitter we are, the better chance we've got at getting into those good positions. And the ball is king in those situations. If we know where the ball is and we can track it, we can hopefully be in the best position to make those decisions. But yeah, it will be challenging, particularly for the guys and girls that are on their own out there at the community level.
I think, yeah, we're just going to have to get in goal a little bit more than we might have done beforehand. And as Craig said, we can't lose sight of that ball. Once we lose sight of that ball, we're really compromised. So work rate to get in goal, and then don't lose sight of that ball.
Awesome. No, that's some great advice. While we're sort of I know Craig sort of said about them being grouped together with goal line dropouts and 50-22s to make space. We'll move on to some of the 50-22 questions. One that's come up quite a lot, and it came up quite early, was if we take a free kick, can we benefit from the law from a free kick? And if we can, how do we have to tap it? Can we just take it direct from the free kick?
No, so I think there was clarity on this from World Rugby where it can be kicked direct from a free kick, provided that it obviously that if it's outside the 22, it bounces before. So if it's kicked from outside that player's 22, as long as it bounces before it goes into touch, then the 50-22 would apply. There's no need to tap it beforehand. Yeah, so that's to encourage people to kick quickly and to play the ball quickly.
And if the ball was to go straight into touch, obviously that's not changed. Craig, how would we be restarting there?
So if the free kick's in their 22, obviously they can hoof it straight into touch. Obviously they won't get the ball at the line out, but it can go straight into touch. And obviously if it's outside their 22, then if you're hoofing a ball outside your 22 straight into touch, you've got a bit of a problem, and we're going to be coming back unless the team wants to go quickly.
Awesome.
And just I'm gonna mess you up and go back to the goal line dropout, because it links to seeing the ball and it being held up. I know a few people have asked me, well, what happens if there's doubt? Can we still give the attacker the benefit of the doubt and give them an attacking 5-metre scrum? I think the answer to that is you can't have it both ways. So if you as a referee aren't giving the try and know the ball is over the goal line, then you're indirectly saying that it's held up. Otherwise, you'd have given the try. So if you can't see the ball to give the try, it's a goal line dropout. You can't just say, well, I'm not really sure, so I'm going to give a 5-metre scrum.
And I suppose that a lot of that is just having a bit of confidence in your decision making as well. And a lot of those things are going to come with all of these laws. A bit like, obviously, not everybody's lucky enough to have assistant referees. You might not even have touch judges necessarily. And it's just making a decision and backing your decision, having the confidence to do that. Yeah,
I've sold many a bad decision, so sell it with conviction. Don't laugh at that, Tom.
I suppose another 50-22 question that's come in is, and it's around that confidence and decision making, I suppose, is if a 50-22 attempt hits the corner flag and goes dead, what's the decision? Now, this is obviously corner flag law and things like that. What's the right decision there?
So if it's kicked and hits the corner flag and goes into touch, then it's not gone. Then the 50-22 would apply. So it's not gone directly into touch. It's hit something or somebody before that, then the 50-22 would apply. If it hits the corner flag and goes dead or touching goal, then it would be the same as it would be now. So it would be either scrum back or 22 option.
Awesome. It's one of those things where I think people up and down the country have been sat thinking, well, when can we still actually have a 22? I know there's obviously been lists coming out and people having ideas and things like that. So this is just another one to add to that list, I suppose. But nothing's really changed there, has it? It's effectively a kick dead.
It's a good question though, because there's now a really limited number of times where you're going to have a 22-meter dropout. So if you know what they are, then by reverse logic, you can figure out when it's a goal line dropout.
Perfect. Sort of final question around the 50-22s has come in. In the previous episode, the panel talked about communication around the halfway line with 50-22 and sort of making players aware. What have you found that works well for you, if anything, in the professional game, and can we transfer any of that into the community game?
More chat the better, particularly the community game, where it's pretty mini junior rugby, where you're just as much a coach as you are a referee. So we've been managing it the same as we have a 22. So call when it's taken back in. Sometimes you end up with internal thought processes coming out loud, so you communicate when it has been taken back, but there's been a phase of play. If it's really close, like you would with the 22, if the standing foot's really close to the halfway line when it's kicked, communicate he's inside, she's inside, or outside, and then everyone knows where they stand. So it's adds clarity and stops any appeal or debate. So proactive, early chat, but it's the same phrases we're using around the 22. We're just applying it to a different area of the pitch.
Tom, anything from your perspective? Anything that, obviously, I know you said there's not been too many, but do you think that's pretty sound to do in the community game as well?
I still haven't got close to having one in any game that I've been involved in, so I'm looking forward to when we do. No, but we've talked about it a lot, and we'll, again, what Craig said, basically, we'll be communicating as much as we can, whether that's whether for the players, for my assistant referees, or whoever it might be. Just making it clear when that ball is kicked, and you just got to be a little bit more aware as referees when we get into that area, and it's just an extra little thing to think about. But as Craig said, we've just got to treat it the same as we would do a 22, and just make sure that that's now part of our process when we get close to the halfway line.
Yeah. And I think certainly in the community game where we don't have those assistant referees or touch judges, the clearer message that you can give to the players live, the more expected the decision is when we go down the pitch. So if you've made it nice and clear with sort of big, loud comms that the player was always inside their half and then the ball's kicked into the 22, it's all about those expected decisions. The expected decision is, oh, that is a 50-22. So, yeah, I completely agree.
And I think the other thing to think about here is that we've actually got a little bit more time than we think to communicate it, because the line-out's going to be in exactly the same place as it would be regardless of whether it's 50-22 or not. It's not like an out on the full from a 22 where it could be either just outside the 22 or beyond halfway. The line-out's going to be in the same place. As we're running to that line-out, we can be communicating that and just making it clear whose ball it is and why.
Perfect. So we'll move on to one of the other laws, really, and this is around the targeting of lower limbs. We've kind of had a question come in saying that what does targeting of lower limbs look like in real terms? What are we looking for, and what are maybe some red flags to think that was a targeted lower limb?
I think these are going to be the most difficult thing to get, especially in games where you haven't got the help of assistant referees and TMOs. In terms of what we'd be looking at, a lot of these happen as a result of a side entry. So I think we've got to go back to refereeing the tackle appropriately. And a lot of them will happen where we haven't refereed the jackler either we haven't penalised the jackler because he or she hasn't been completely legal, or we haven't rewarded that jackler for with a holding on penalty quick enough. And it's always the players that arrive that little bit late. So I think going back to what we talked about at the very start, we can't forget about refereeing the tackle zone first. If we referee that tackle zone appropriately and stick to our process in terms of getting that tackler out, rewarding jacklers who are legal nice and early when we see that clear pull on the ball, and then referee that side entry, then hopefully we shouldn't get this. But I think, and I'll let Craig come with his thoughts, but from my point of view, it's that out of control, hitting a breakdown without that level of control where you're looking to bind onto somebody are the ones where you're probably going to be looking for these.
Yeah, I think Tommy summed it up quite well, Owen. Like, you're going to be looking at side entries. You're going to be looking at when jacklers are in really good positions to reward them quickly. And as Tom's alluded to, like, isolated players is when you're going to get clear outs. They're pretty desperate clear outs, which is when the out of control element comes into it. But I mean, off one view live, referees are going to do really well to see this clearly. I think we can definitely deal with the side entries. We can definitely get the holding on penalties nice and quickly. But there's probably going to have to be a lot going for it, like an entry, a no arms, and a really low off feet clear out that clearly targets someone's knee for people to pick it up. So if we referee the simple sort of components of the breakdown, like Thomas said, I think that's the best chance we've got at not even seeing this to need to referee it in the community game.
Yeah, I mean, the anybody that's done the England Rugby Refereeing Award in the last sort of 12 months on the webinars, I know you two guys obviously help with some of the content on that around talk about process, and it is all about that. I think Tom talks about the tackle process on the award actually, and it is about move the tackler, ball carrier, and then arriving players, and we want to make sure that the right people are getting rewarded properly and quickly, because then arguably we don't even need to be subject to any of these clear outs, really, do we?
Yep, completely agree. Yep,
great stuff. So look, we're coming towards the end of the ones that have been sent in, and we'll finish on one that is probably, I'd imagine, is going to be slightly different in the professional game to the community game, but we talk about the pre-latch and the latcher going into contact. So the question says, with the pre-latch laws, I understand that as a player, were I to latch onto a teammate and drive through contact and end up on the floor, that's a penalty. What if the latcher was to roll away from the contact immediately? Would this still be a penalty? Now, I know this is where there's going to be a little bit of disparity. It'd be great to hear what kind of you guys are going to be doing in the Premiership and what we'd expect to see on the telly.
It's a really good point.
Yeah,
it's a really good point. Oh, there will be a disparity between what you see us do on TV and what I think we expect in the community game. We're being asked to go pretty hard on this, whereas if you translate that to a vet game in the community or a junior game, you'd end up with so many penalties that no one would be enjoying their afternoon. So I think there are different priorities here. But for us, yeah, if you pre-latch, the message is expect to be penalised if you go off your feet. That's the starting point. If you go off your feet and it's linked to the question you asked and you land on the ball or on top of the player, you're going to be penalised. No matter how quick you reload, no matter how quick you dive out of the way, it's a penalty. The only scenarios where you wouldn't be penalised, I think there's a good example from one of the Bledisloe Cup games, is where the latcher goes to ground but lands to the side. He doesn't land on top and then have to move. He just lands to the side. So at no point is he on the tackle, is he on the ball preventing a competition. But for the professional game, bar those situations, it's if you latch and go off feet, it's going to be a penalty. And if it isn't, it's a miss on our behalf, not because we found a reason to justify a play on. But I'm not advocating that in the community game. I still think you've got the ones where if they reload immediately and there's no one near, you can play on and you can talk to them, you can manage it. And if it becomes a repeated issue, then you've got no choice but to penalise them. But yeah, we're having management, I think, removed an element from what we do regards that specific area. I think you've still got scope to do that in the community game.
And Craig talked about managing those situations. Tom, how do you think maybe community referees can manage, like Craig says, about where it might be that there's no opposition at the breakdown or it's a little bit of a slower game? How do you think we can use our management tools in that situation?
I think you've got to communicate it, and if you're not going to penalise the latcher for whatever reason, then you need to explain why you're not. And similarly, if you have penalised them, you need to explain why you have. And as Craig talked about, a little bit more coaching element of community rugby, then that's what the referee can do to help the situation, to help the game, to help the players. So as Craig said, I think if somebody lands on top of their teammate or on top of the ball, I think the law is now expecting us to penalise that. If they don't, then in order to try and generate some sort of game and some continuity, especially in the community game, then I think we can look to not go looking too closely at these.
Yeah, and I think from a coaching and refereeing perspective, we think about those principles of play. We all know the sort of the phrase principles of play. If we can get continuity and go forward, it just adds better value to it in that situation. So no, that's fantastic. We're just going to end on a little bit about age grade. We've had a lot of questions that have come in around age grade, and obviously there's some slight differences kind of up to January. So the key messaging for us realistically is under 16s and above. Global law trials are in play from September, as they kind of as always have been. Under 15s is from January onwards. The global law trials will be in play, because obviously we're playing up to under 14s laws up until January. At that point, we can go back to our kind of respective age grade, and that is for boys and girls rugby at age grade. Under 14s and below, because of changes in pitch sizes and numbers of players, things like that, there aren't any global law trials. All right, so that's the big age grade message from us. So look, there's no other questions that have come in, lads. I'm just going to ask if we can there's a couple of clips from the Allianz Premier 15s at the weekend, where there's a couple of global law trials, and they've been highlighted on social media. So it was really just from me, just to kind of finish off, and if we just have a little comment about these and why they're good play and what it means for us as referees, really.
Was has ended. That's an excellent kick, you have to say, from Flo Williams.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
Tom, obviously we've had a goal line dropout that's gone out around the halfway line. Everything good there from a refereeing perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Look, we don't need to get too complicated about these. The goal line dropout, once it's taken, is exactly the same as a 22 or a restart kick. If it bounces into touch, then it's play on. So yeah, there's a good example there of them finding a little bit of space and putting the defence on their own halfway line for a line out.
Perfect. And so should that have maybe gone directly into touch? Just remind us how we'd be looking to restart. So
again, it's the same as at 22. So we'd be looking at either a line out on the 5 metre line to the opposition. We'd be looking the option to take the kick again. Or we'd be looking for a scrum in line with where the ball was kicked. I think that's everything. Craig, have I got everything? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a list of them. I think you've covered them.
It's all right. We've got the scrum restart is obviously in the middle of the park. Like you say, it's the same as 22 option, isn't it?
I think that the scrum is in line with where the ball was kicked.
Yep.
Under the GLT. So
Okay.
that's a little bit. So there's a little bit of a change to the 22. So if it's taken 5 meters from the touch line, the scrum would be on the 5 meter line, on the intersection of the two 5 meter lines. Obviously, if it's taken under the post, the scrum would be in front of the post. So that's where there is a little bit of a tweak.
It's partly because most 22s are naturally taken in the middle of the pitch, which is why we see most scrums in the middle of the pitch. But there's no requirement that I know of in law that even says that has to be the case. So the 22, if it's taken to an edge of the pitch, that's where the scrum would be. It's where it was kicked from.
And the goal line dropout can obviously happen anywhere along that line, can't it?
Yep. And that's part of the joy of the goal line dropout in terms of getting defenders back on their feet and into play, because the now team in possession can run it from one side of the pitch to the next to take it, to try and find that space and get the ball back in play, because that's the whole point of that law in particular.
Awesome. I've just got another one that's come from the Allianz Premier 15s at the weekend. This phase originates from a penalty that's been given.
The penalty goes to Gloucester Hartpury again, and just every time Bristol Bears are getting a decent nudge on. Now is this going to be a 50-22 from Natasha Hunt? Didn't get one in the game last week. Did you get one, Nolly Waterman?
No, we didn't, but it's a brilliant option from Mo Hunt.
I'm just going to dive back to the other clip as well, mate.
Yeah.
Since I've just quickly checked the law book. So if that goal line dropout had gone into touch in the opposition half or in the opposition 22, could it be 50-22? Because it's been kicked from within our own half, albeit from a goal line dropout. Goes indirectly into touch in the opposition's 22. Is it a 50-22, or does that law not apply to restart kicks? I think
the law says it's open kicks in open play. But,
yeah.
So generating your own questions within an FAQs.
So you wouldn't be able to do it because it's a restart kick. So yeah.
Perfect. Bonus question from Craig Maxwell-Keys, answered by Craig Maxwell-Keys.
Answered incorrectly would have been embarrassing, eh?
Awesome. So we've got that second clip there where the penalty is awarded about 5 or 6 metres within the Gloucester-Hartpury half. The scrum half takes a quick tap and then kicks the ball into the 22. Is that a 50-22, or would that always be their ball because it's off a penalty? Does that not count because they've quick tapped it?
So if they'd kicked it directly from the penalty, if they had kicked it directly from the penalty, then it would be Gloucester-Hartpury ball anyway. The fact here that Mo Hunt takes a quick tap first, she's taken the penalty, then it's an open field kick, which is taken inside her own half, bounces into touch in the opposition 22. That would be a 50-22. So either way here, that would be Gloucester-Hartpury ball.
Awesome. So if that kick, if the tap kick was taken and the ball didn't reach the 22, then that would have been Bristol Bears ball.
Correct.
Fantastic. Look, that's all the clips that we've been sent in. That's all the questions that we've been sent in. If you've got anything else, please reach out to us on our social media, obviously on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Get hold of RFU_refs. Send in your questions. If we start having another raft come through, we will try and put another one of these sections on. Obviously, the more rugby that starts to get played, the more conversation and the more questions that we generate. So it can only be good for officiating if we have these conversations. So just as a finishing note, I suppose, for the pair of you, how do you see the global law trials changing the game? That you guys officiate at the top? What do we think that it's going to create?
I think it's almost too early to say in many respects because, as I said, I've been involved with 3 games now, and I've had 1 global law trial application. I've had 1 goal line dropout. Apart from that, I haven't had anything. But I think so. The teams are still adapting, but I think. We'll see situations where we have fewer people off their feet at the breakdown. Hopefully, encourage more of a contest as a result, and hopefully will generate more quick ball. As I said, it's difficult to say, but I think that latcher is probably going to be the key change that you see in the Premiership. And in my experience, the teams have reacted really well to that and have changed the way that they're approaching that area of the game. But hopefully now that will mean that, as I said, that breakdown will look a little bit cleaner. It'll have fewer people off their feet and more competition.
Craig?
Yeah, I think Tommy's covered off the latcher piece, but I think focus on the other 2, which are all about space, more ball in play time. I think spectators, potentially across the community game, if you've got a kicker that can exploit those laws, and particularly in the elite game, because you've got 50-22 options, you're going to have more attacking rugby in the so-called red zone on a team's line. And if you don't score and get held up, there's not going to be a time-consuming 5-metre scrum, which we all know you can probably go and get a beer or a cup of tea and come back and it will still be going on. It's going to be a case of quick restart, ball back in play. And because it's on the goal line, the attacking team are going to be back on the goal line. So you're going to potentially see lots of goal line pressure phases, which is, I suppose, what a spectator wants to see because it's entertaining, sort of edge of your seat rugby. So from a spectator perspective, that's what I'm probably most looking forward to.
Awesome. What a great way to finish that. Look, it just leaves me to say thank you very much to Tom and Craig for coming on this session. And we'll hope to see you on one of our Connected Match Official sessions very soon. So thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.